In the ICU at 2 in the morning, a man in a wrinkled shirt knelt beside a woman who ruled a billion-dollar empire. His dark brown, calloused fingers wrapped around her pale, motionless hand. The machines beeped, the fluorescent lights hummed, and Darius Mitchell, a black single father who had spent 3 years as her invisible assistant, finally said the words he had buried for 1,000 silent days. "Please don't die," he whispered, his voice cracking in the sterile air. "You're the one I've loved all along." He didn't know she could hear him. Every single word. Adrienne Shaw, the CEO, who never let anyone close, was trapped inside her own body, listening to the only confession of love she had ever received that meant something. What happens when the walls we build become the prison we cannot escape? The alarm clock read 4:53 when Darius Mitchell opened his eyes 7 minutes before it was supposed to ring. He had trained himself to wake early to steal those quiet moments before the world demanded everything from him. The small apartment was still dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside that painted amber stripes across the ceiling. He lay there for exactly 30 seconds, counting his breaths before swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet as he padded toward the kitchen, careful to avoid the spot near the bathroom door that always groaned too loud. In the kitchen, Darius moved with the precision of a man who had memorized every inch of his domain. He cracked 2 eggs into a bowl, whisked them with a fork until they turned pale yellow, and poured them into a pan that was already warming on the stove. The bread went into the toaster. The orange juice came out of the refrigerator. Every motion was deliberate, efficient, born from 4 years of doing this alone. 4 years since Keisha had closed her eyes for the last time, her hand growing cold in his while their 3-year-old daughter slept in the next room, unaware that her world was about to shatter. Darius had rebuilt that world, piece by piece, egg by egg, morning by morning. It was the only way he knew how to keep going, the only way to honor the promise he had made to Keisha in those final moments. Take care of our girl, love her enough for both of us. The sound of small feet shuffling across the floor made him turn. Amara stood in the doorway, her tight dark curls a tangled mess around her warm brown face, her favorite stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. She was 7 now, all skinny legs and curious eyes, and every time Darius looked at her, he saw Keisha smiling back at him, the shape of her nose, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the stubborn set of her jaw when she decided something mattered. Amara yawned, rubbed her eyes with her free hand, and shuffled toward the kitchen table without a word. She was not a morning person, his daughter, but she had learned to be present anyway because that was what their little family did. They showed up for each other no matter what. Darius slid the scrambled eggs onto a plate, added 2 slices of toast with just a thin layer of butter the way she liked it, and set it in front of her. He poured a glass of orange juice, placed it beside the plate, and then sat down across from her with his own cup of coffee. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who have learned to read each other without words. When Amara finished, she looked up at him and smiled, a small, private smile that was just for him. "Thanks, Daddy," she said, and those 2 words were enough to make everything else worth it. Darius reached across the table and squeezed her small brown hand. "Always, sweetheart. Now go get dressed. We need to leave in 20 minutes. The drive to school took 15 minutes when traffic was light, 25 when it was not. This morning fell somewhere in between, and Darius used the time to run through his mental checklist for the day. Drop Amara at school, get to the office by 7, prepare Miss Shaw's schedule, her coffee, her briefing materials, anticipate her needs before she knew she had them. 3 years he had worked as her executive assistant, and in that time he had learned to read Adrienne Shaw the way a sailor learns to read the sky. He knew when a storm was coming by the set of her shoulders. He knew when to speak and when to remain silent by the rhythm of her typing. He knew that she took her coffee at exactly 140 degrees, that she preferred her reports organized by priority rather than chronology, that she never ate breakfast but always crashed around 2 in the afternoon if no one reminded her to eat lunch. These were the small details that made up his devotion, the invisible threads that connected him to a woman who barely knew his name. Amara chattered about her upcoming science project as they drove. Something about volcanoes and baking soda, and how she wanted to make the biggest explosion in class history. Darius listened with half his attention while the other half wandered where it always wandered these days. To a corner office on the 47th floor, to a woman with auburn hair and green eyes who moved through the world like she was made of steel and ice. Adrienne Shaw had built her real estate empire from nothing, had clawed her way up from a childhood she never spoke about, and had surrounded herself with walls so high that no one could see over them. But Darius had spent 3 years standing just outside those walls, and sometimes in unguarded moments he caught glimpses of what lay behind them. A flash of loneliness in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. The way her shoulders tensed when her phone rang and the caller ID showed her mother's name. The exhaustion she tried so hard to hide beneath her perfect makeup and sharper tongue. He saw all of it. He loved all of it. And he had never said a word. He pulled up to the school and Amara unbuckled her seatbelt, grabbed her backpack, and leaned over to kiss his cheek. "Love you, Daddy," she said, already opening the door. Darius caught her hand before she could escape. "Love you more, Mara girl. Mrs. Patterson will pick you up today, okay? I might be late." Amara nodded, used to this arrangement by now. And then she was gone, swallowed by the stream of children flowing toward the building. Darius watched until she disappeared through the front doors, her curls bouncing with each step, and then he put the car in drive and headed toward downtown. The elevator doors opened on the 47th floor at 6:58, and Darius stepped out into the hushed elegance of Shaw Development's executive suite. The reception desk was empty, would be for another hour, but Darius had his own keycard and his own routines. He moved through the silent office like a ghost, flipping on lights, checking the conference room to make sure the chairs were aligned and the water glasses were clean. Marble floors, glass walls, polished chrome, places where a black man like him still sometimes drew second glances from visitors who assumed he was the janitor, not the one keeping the CEO's world from collapsing. He ignored that the way he always did and kept moving. In the small kitchen adjacent to Adrienne's office, he prepared her coffee with the same care a chemist might use to mix volatile compounds. Fresh beans from the small roaster on 5th Street, ground that morning, water heated to precisely the right temperature, exactly 2.5 minutes of brewing time. He poured it into her favorite mug, the plain white one without any logo, because she had once mentioned she found branded mugs tacky and carried it to her desk along with her schedule for the day. Adrienne arrived at 7:30, as she always did. Darius heard the elevator chime, heard the sharp click of her heels on the marble floor, and felt his heart do that familiar, stuttering thing it always did when she was near. She wore a charcoal gray suit today, tailored to perfection, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. Beautiful and untouchable. She did not look at him as she entered, did not acknowledge his presence beyond a brief nod in his direction. She simply walked to her desk, picked up the coffee, took a sip, and opened the folder he had prepared. "The Henderson meeting has been moved to 10, Darius said, his voice calm and professional, betraying none of the feelings churning beneath the surface. Their CFO had a scheduling conflict. "I've adjusted your lunch accordingly. The quarterly reports are on your desk, flagged by priority, and your brother called twice yesterday evening. I didn't think it was urgent enough to disturb you." Adrienne's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at the mention of her brother, a tiny crack in her armor, but she said nothing. She simply nodded again, and Darius retreated to his desk outside her office, where he would spend the next 12 hours anticipating her every need while pretending he did not notice the way the afternoon light caught the gold flecks in her eyes. The board meeting started at 2 and ran until nearly 6. Darius watched through the glass walls of the conference room as Adrienne fielded questions from hostile board members, deflected criticisms about the company's expansion strategy, and defended her vision with controlled ferocity. She was magnificent when she was fighting, all sharp edges and sharper words. And Darius found himself holding his breath as she went toe-to-toe with men twice her age, who clearly resented taking orders from a woman. More than once, he caught the way their gazes slid over him when he stepped in to refill water or pass a file, that quick dismissal reserved for assistants and for black men who didn't belong at the table. He tucked the feeling away like he always did and focused on her. By the time the meeting ended, she looked exhausted in a way that makeup could not hide. Her shoulders had dropped. The lines around her eyes had deepened. She had not eaten anything since the coffee he had brought her that morning. Darius intercepted her in the hallway outside the conference room. "I ordered Thai from that place you like on 7th Street, he said quietly, falling into step beside her. "It should be waiting in your office. The green curry, extra spicy, with jasmine rice and spring rolls because you didn't eat lunch." Adrienne stopped walking. For a moment, she just looked at him, and there was something in her expression that Darius could not quite read. Surprise, maybe. Something softer. "Thank you, Darius," she said, and her voice was different somehow, less sharp than usual. "I don't know what I would do without you." She walked away before he could respond, but Darius stood there replaying those words. "I don't know what I would do without you." It was the closest thing to personal acknowledgement she had ever given him. At 8 o'clock, Darius knocked on her door. She was still hunched over her laptop, still wearing that exhausted expression she thought no one could see. "I'm heading out unless you need anything else." Adrienne looked up, and for just a moment, Darius saw something vulnerable flash across her face. She looked lonely, desperately lonely, sitting in her beautiful office, surrounded by everything she had built and no one to share it with. "Actually," she said, and her voice wavered slightly, "I need to go home. Would you mind driving me? My car's in the shop and I don't want to deal with a rideshare tonight." Darius nodded, trying to keep his face neutral despite the way his heart had started racing. In 3 years, she had never asked him to drive her anywhere. "Of course, I'll pull the car around." The drive started in silence, the kind of heavy quiet that comes when two people have too much to say and no idea how to begin. They were 20 minutes in when Adrienne finally spoke, her voice so soft he almost missed it. "Do you ever get tired of it? Of taking care of everyone else? Of putting yourself last?" Darius considered the question. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "She's 7. Her name is Amara. Taking care of her isn't tiring. It's the best part of my day." Adrienne turned to look at him with genuine curiosity. "You have a daughter? I didn't know that." Darius smiled ruefully. "You never asked." The words hung in the air. Not an accusation, but a simple statement of fact. Something shifted in her expression. Something that looked almost like shame. "Tell me about her," she said quietly. "Tell me about Amara." And so Darius did. He told her about the scrambled eggs and the morning routine, about the science project with the volcano. He told her about Keisha, about the cancer that had stolen her away, about learning to be both mother and father to a little girl with deep brown skin and bright eyes who deserved so much more than he could give her. He told her more than he had told anyone in 4 years, because something about the darkness and quiet of the car made it feel safe, even for a black man who'd learned the hard way to keep his guard up in certain neighborhoods. Adrienne listened without interrupting, her usual armor falling away piece by piece. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "She's lucky to have you. Not everyone has someone who loves them like that." There was longing in her voice. Darius opened his mouth to respond, but he never got the chance. The truck came from nowhere, a massive semi that had run the red light and was barreling toward them. Darius saw it bearing down on the passenger side where Adrienne sat, and he did the only thing he could. He wrenched the wheel to the left, trying to put himself between her and the impact. The truck hit them anyway, a glancing blow that sent the car spinning. Glass shattered. Metal screamed. Darius felt something crack in his chest as the airbag deployed, and then everything went black. When Darius opened his eyes, he was lying on asphalt, surrounded by flashing lights. His head was pounding. His ribs screamed with every breath. But all he could think about was Adrienne. He pushed himself up and looked toward the wreckage. The passenger side was destroyed, crumpled inward. Adrienne was being lifted onto a stretcher, her face pale and still, her auburn hair matted with blood. At the hospital, Darius refused to stay in his room. He had bruised ribs, a mild concussion, and 12 stitches on his forehead, but he would not rest until he knew about Adrienne. A nurse told him she was in the ICU, that she had suffered a traumatic brain injury, that she was in a coma, and they did not know when she would wake up. Darius called Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who watched Amara. "Don't worry about a thing," she said. "Amara is safe. You do what you need to do." Around midnight, a doctor pulled him aside. "You saved her life. The way you turned the wheel, you took the brunt of the impact. If you hadn't done that, she would be dead." The words did not make Darius feel better. Adrian was still fighting for her life, and there was nothing he could do. The nurses let Darius sit beside Adrian's bed in the quiet hours of the night. She looked smaller somehow, lying among the tubes and wires. He took her hand in his, careful not to disturb the IV line, his dark brown fingers wrapped around her pale ones. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said softly. "The doctors say coma patients sometimes can, so I'm going to talk to you. My wife's name was Keisha. She died 4 years ago from cancer. Amara was only 3. I remember sitting by her bed, holding her hand, praying for a miracle that never came. After she died, I didn't think I could ever feel that way about anyone again. And then I started working for you, and everything changed." In the darkness of her own mind, Adrienne Shaw was drowning. She was trapped between consciousness and oblivion, and then she heard it. A voice, low and gentle. "Darius." She wanted to tell him she could hear, but her body would not obey. She could only listen. "I never meant to fall in love with you," Darius continued. "It just happened. I started noticing things. The way you rub your temples when you're stressed. The way your voice gets softer when you're tired. The way you look out the window sometimes, like you're searching for something you lost. I know you don't see me. I know I'm just the guy who brings your coffee. But I see you, Adrienne. I've always seen you, and I love you. I've loved you for 3 years." Adrienne's heart shattered and rebuilt itself. Inside her mind, she was screaming, trying to reach him. No one had ever loved her. Not like this. Not without wanting something in return. Darius came every night for a week. He had worked out a system with Mrs. Patterson, who had unofficially adopted both him and Amara in the days following the accident. Each afternoon, he would pick up Amara from school and spend a few hours with her, helping with homework and making dinner and reading bedtime stories about princesses and brave knights. Then he would drive to the hospital and sit beside Adrienne's bed until the early hours of the morning, talking to her, telling her about his day, about the life waiting for her, if only she would wake up. One evening, as Darius was getting ready to leave for the hospital, Amara tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, where do you go every night?" Darius knelt down so he was at eye level with his daughter. "I go to visit someone, sweetheart. Someone who's very sick and needs company." Amara's face scrunched up with concern. "Is it the lady from your work? The one you always talk about?" Darius felt his heart squeeze. He had not realized he talked about Adrienne at home. Had not known that his feelings were so obvious even a 7-year-old could see them. "Yes, baby, it's her. She was in an accident and she's sleeping now. The doctors are trying to help her wake up." Amara thought about this for a moment. Then she ran to her room and came back with a piece of paper and her box of crayons. "I'm going to draw her a picture," she announced. "When Mommy was sick, I drew her pictures and she said they made her feel better. Maybe the sleeping lady needs a picture too." Darius's eyes burned as he watched his daughter settle at the kitchen table and begin to draw with fierce concentration, her curls falling over her forehead as she leaned in. Half an hour later, she presented him with her creation. A princess with orange hair sleeping in a forest of purple trees, with a brown-skinned man with short curls and a little girl with a cloud of tight curls holding hands beside her. "That's you," Amara explained, pointing to the man, "and that's me. And that's the sleeping princess. We're waiting for her to wake up so we can all be friends." Darius hugged his daughter so tightly she squeaked in protest. "I'll give it to her tonight," he promised. "I'm sure she'll love it." That night, he pinned the drawing to the wall beside Adrienne's bed where she would see it if she opened her eyes. Each night, Darius talked to Adrienne. He told her about his days, about Amara's antics, about how the office felt empty without her. He told her about the small moments that made up a life, the scrambled eggs and the bedtime stories, and the way Amara laughed when she chased pigeons in the park. He talked about Keisha sometimes, about the love they had shared, and the lessons she had taught him about living fully, even when the world tried to break you down. And he talked about his feelings for Adrienne, the feelings he had buried for 3 years, the love he had never expected to find again. Inside her darkness, Adrienne listened to every word. She clung to his voice like a lifeline, the only thing keeping her tethered to a world she was not sure she wanted to return to. She thought about every kindness Darius had shown her over 3 years, all the small gestures she had taken for granted, the vitamin C on her desk when she was getting sick, left without a note, because he knew she would dismiss it if she knew it came from him. The rescheduled meetings when she was exhausted, the lies he told other executives to protect her reputation, the cupcake with a single candle on her birthday, the one she had dismissed as inappropriate, even as something inside her cracked with longing. Now trapped in this darkness, she finally understood. It was love. It had always been love, and she had been too afraid to see it. On the 7th day, Adrienne's family arrived. Darius was sitting beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers, when the door swung open and a woman in an expensive coat swept in. She was in her 60s with the same auburn hair as Adrienne, though streaked with gray and styled in a way that suggested regular salon visits. Behind her came a man in his 40s with a permanent sneer twisting his handsome features. Vivian Shaw, Adrienne's mother, and Carter Shaw, her older brother. Vivian stopped short when she saw Darius. Her eyes swept over him, taking in his wrinkled shirt, his 5-day beard, his dark brown hand wrapped around her daughter's pale fingers. Her lip curled in undisguised distaste. "Who are you?" Darius stood slowly, releasing Adrienne's hand with reluctance. "Darius Mitchell, ma'am. I'm Adrienne's executive assistant. I was driving when the accident happened. I wanted to make sure she wasn't alone." Carter stepped forward, positioning himself between Darius and the bed like a guard dog defending territory. "Her family is here now. You can leave." Inside her mind, Adrienne screamed. She could hear her mother's cold voice, the same voice that had told her she was worthless throughout her childhood. She could hear Carter's dismissiveness, the same tone he had used when he told her she would never amount to anything, that she was just a girl playing at business. And she could hear the silence where Darius's voice had been, the absence of the only warmth she had felt in this endless darkness. Darius held Carter's gaze without flinching. He'd had years of practice keeping his shoulders square when people talked down to him, when they decided with a glance that a black assistant wasn't worth listening to. "In 3 years of working for your daughter, I have never seen anyone else show up for her," he said quietly. "Not for late nights at the office when she worked until midnight. Not for holidays when she sat alone in her apartment. Not for her birthday, which she spent in that same office because she had nowhere else to go and no one to celebrate with. So forgive me if I thought she might want someone here when she woke up. Someone who actually cares whether she lives or dies." Vivian's face flushed with anger. "How dare you speak to us that way? You don't know anything about our family, about our relationship with Adrienne." Darius's voice remained steady. "You're right. I don't know the details, but I know what I've seen. I know that she tenses up every time your name appears on her phone. I know that she never mentions you unless she has to. I know that in 3 years, this is the first time either of you has shown up for her in any capacity. Maybe I'm just an assistant. Maybe I don't have the right to be here. But at least I showed up. That's more than I can say for you." Carter's face darkened with rage. He looked ready to throw a punch. "You're just an assistant, a nobody. Know your place." Vivian's voice cut through the tension like ice. "Call security. Have this man removed from the hospital. He has no business here." But before they could act, Darius walked back to Adrienne's bedside. He leaned close and whispered the words that changed everything. "Please don't die. You're the one I've loved all along. I know you don't know that. I know you never saw me, but I saw you every day for 3 years. I saw you. Amara drew you a picture. She calls you the sleeping princess. She's waiting to meet you. I'm waiting for you. Please, Adrienne, please come back." He straightened up, tears burning his eyes. He turned to leave. And then he felt it, fingers tightening around his hand, weak, trembling, but unmistakable. Darius spun around. Adrienne's eyes were open. She looked directly at him, her gaze unfocused but present. Her lips moved. "Don't go." The room erupted into chaos. Nurses rushed in, doctors were paged. Vivian and Carter stood frozen. But Darius dropped to his knees beside her bed, tears streaming down his face. You're awake, you're awake. Adrian's voice was hoarse, cracking. I heard everything. Vivian pushed forward. Adrian, darling. But Adrian's eyes never left Darius. Mother, leave. I need to talk to Darius alone. Carter sputtered. He's the only one who stayed. After they left, Adrian spoke. I heard every word. Every night. Your voice kept me from drowning in the darkness. Her eyes filled with tears. I've spent my whole life building walls because I was terrified of getting hurt. But those walls just made sure I was always alone. You saw through all of that. You saw me when I couldn't even see myself. Darius lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I never wanted to overstep. I knew my place. I knew you were the CEO and I was just the assistant. And I'm a black man in your world on top of that. But love doesn't care about titles or hierarchies. It just is. And I couldn't help what I felt, even if I could never act on it. Adrian shook her head slowly. 3 years, Darius. 3 years you showed up for me every single day. You remembered my coffee order, my food preferences, my schedule. You knew when I was having a bad day before I even knew it myself. You took care of me in 1,000 small ways. And I never even thanked you. I never even saw you as a person with your own life, your own struggles, your own heart. She told him about her childhood then, about the cold mansion she grew up in, where love was measured in achievements and affection was withheld as punishment. A mother who valued appearances over everything, who had taught her that showing emotion was weakness and needing others was failure. A father who left when she was 12 for another family, another set of children who apparently deserved his presence more than she did. A brother who saw her success as a personal insult, who had spent their entire lives trying to undermine her. I learned early that love was conditional, Adrienne continued, her voice barely above a whisper, that people leave when you need them most. So I stopped needing anyone. I built my company, my empire, my walls. I convinced myself that success was enough, that I didn't need anything else. But sitting in that darkness, listening to you talk about your daughter, about your wife, about the life you built, after losing everything, I realized how wrong I was. You had lost so much, Darius, but you still had love. You still had hope. You still had room in your heart for more. Darius squeezed her hand. I almost gave up after Keisha died. I almost let the grief swallow me whole. But Amara needed me. She was so small, so confused, and she needed her daddy to keep going. So I did. One day at a time, one scrambled egg at a time. And somewhere along the way, I realized that love isn't about protecting yourself from pain. It's about finding people worth the risk. And I was worth the risk? Adrienne asked, her voice trembling. You've always been worth the risk, Darius replied. From the very first day. 3 years, Darius, she whispered. 3 years you loved me, and I was too blind to notice. You notice now? Darius said simply. That's all that matters. A week later, Adriana was strong enough for visitors. Darius brought Amara, who clutched a rolled-up paper in her small hands like it contained the secrets of the universe. When they walked into the hospital room, Amara hung back at first, suddenly shy in the presence of the sleeping princess she had drawn so many pictures of. But then Adrienne smiled at her, a real smile, warm and welcoming, in a way she had never smiled at anyone in Darius's memory. And Amara's face lit up like Christmas morning. You're awake. You're the princess. I drew you so many pictures while you were sleeping. Daddy put them on your wall so you could see them. Did you see them? I made you something special. She thrust the paper forward, practically vibrating with excitement. It was a drawing in crayon, done with the fierce concentration only a 7-year-old could muster. 3 figures holding hands in front of a house with a heart-shaped door. A brown-skinned man with short curls, a little girl with a puff of curls, and a woman with orange hair wearing a golden crown. That's Daddy, Amara explained, pointing to each figure in turn. And that's me, and that's you. You're the princess. I drew you a crown because all princesses need crowns. And that's our house. See the heart on the door? That means we love you. I used the red crayon special for that because red is the love color. Adrienne's hands trembled as she held the drawing. Her eyes glistened with tears that she did not try to hide. This is our family? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amara nodded seriously with all the gravity a 7-year-old could muster. I drew what I wished for. And wishes come true if you believe hard enough. Daddy taught me that. He said, if you want something really, really bad and you're a good person, the universe helps you get it. I wanted a family with a mommy, and now I have you. Adrian pulled Amara into her arms, holding this child she had never met, but who had somehow claimed her as family. She wept openly without shame for the first time in 38 years. She wept for all the years she had spent alone, for all the love she had denied herself, for all the walls she had built that were finally coming down. 2 weeks later, Adrian was discharged. She did not go back to her penthouse apartment in the city with its expensive furniture and empty rooms and view of a skyline that had never felt like home. She went to Darius's small apartment instead, where Amara had spent 3 days decorating a room with glow in the dark stars on the ceiling, because princesses need stars to make wishes on and pictures from magazines of pretty things taped to the walls. That first morning, Darius woke at his usual time, his body trained to those early hours. But instead of finding an empty kitchen, he found Adrian and Amara already at the table, both still in their pajamas, hair messy, faces bright with sleep. Amara was explaining the finer points of her volcano science project while Adrian listened with what appeared to be genuine fascination, asking questions and making suggestions and treating every word from the 7-year-old's mouth like it contained profound wisdom. Darius made scrambled eggs for 3. He added toast with butter, poured orange juice and coffee, and set the plates on the table just as he had done thousands of times before. But everything was different now. Everything was better. They ate together, the sounds of Amara's chatter filling the small kitchen with life and warmth, and the kind of joy Darius had not felt since Keisha was alive. And when breakfast was done, Adrian caught Darius's hand under the table and held it tight. You know, she said softly, for 3 years you made me coffee every morning. I always thought it was just your job, just something you did because you were paid to do it. I never realized it was love. Every cup at exactly the right temperature, every perfectly organized schedule, every meal you ordered because you knew I forgot to eat. Every time you remembered things about me that I forgot about myself. It was all love, Darius. Every single moment of it. Darius smiled that rueful smile she was learning to treasure. It took you 3 years to figure that out, but I have the rest of my life to make it up to you. She looked at Amara, then back at Darius, and her eyes held a promise that went beyond words. Both of you. I want to learn how to make scrambled eggs. I want to help with volcano projects and bedtime stories. I want to be here for the small moments, the ordinary days, the quiet mornings that make up a life. I've spent 38 years building an empire. Now I want to build something that actually matters. Later that day, they went to the park to feed the ducks. It was a simple outing, the kind of thing millions of families did every weekend. But for Adrian, it felt like stepping into a world she had only ever watched from a distance. Amara ran ahead, clutching a bag of breadcrumbs, her curls bouncing with each step. Darius walked beside Adrian, their hands intertwined, their shoulders brushing with comfortable intimacy. A black man and a powerful white CEO, no longer boss and assistant, but something softer and braver, moving through the world together. As they walked along the path, past other families and couples and children playing on the grass, Adrian stopped suddenly and turned to Darius. You asked me once if I got tired of taking care of everyone else. I've been thinking about your answer, about how taking care of Amara isn't tiring because it's the best part of your day. I think I finally understand. When you love someone, taking care of them isn't a burden. It's a privilege. No one ever taught me that, but you did, you and Amara. At the pond, Amara found a feather. It's a magic feather. If you make a wish on it, it comes true. Adrian knelt down. What are you going to wish for? Amara thought for a moment. Then she shook her head. I already got my wish. I wished for a family, and now I have one. Darius wrapped his arms around both of them. 3 people who had been lost and were now found. The sun sparkled on the water. Daddy, Amara said, in Sleeping Beauty, the prince wakes up the princess, right? Adrian answered. This time the princess woke up the prince. She showed him that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being seen. And your daddy showed me that the best things in life aren't what we build to impress people. They're what we build together. Like scrambled eggs in the morning, like drawings with heart-shaped doors, like family. Amara considered this. That's a better story than Sleeping Beauty. Darius laughed. Yeah, sweetheart, it is. They drove home together to the small apartment that had become big enough for all of them, to the room with stars on the ceiling, to the kitchen where Darius would make scrambled eggs every morning for his family. And if you asked Darius Mitchell what the best decision of his life was, he would not say taking the job as Adrian Shaw's assistant. He would not say turning the wheel that night to save her life. He would say it was the moment he decided to speak, to tell a woman in a coma that he loved her, believing she could not hear. Because sometimes the words we whisper in the dark are the ones that bring people back to the light. And sometimes the people we think will never see us are the ones who have been waiting their whole lives to be seen. Learn more on GLS.